Ferrari went to Canada expecting to get beaten. McLaren had brought upgrades. Mercedes had brought upgrades. Ferrari brought nothing. On paper, this was the weekend they slipped backwards. What nobody expected was that their slower car with no new parts would put Lewis Hamilton on the podium and leave his own team principal admitting they had no idea they were this quick. The result ran so far ahead of expectations, it changed the whole conversation around Ferrari's season. This is how it happened. The freshest news first, because this is the part everyone is reacting to right now. Lewis Hamilton has just finished second at the Canadian Grand Prix. It is his best Grand Prix result since the day he signed for Ferrari. Hamilton's first podium in red. He started fifth on a circuit built around long straights and heavy braking. The exact layout that punishes everything people say is wrong with his car, and he climbed his way to the front of everyone except the dominant Mercedes. He did it the hard way. On lap 62 of the race, with only 6 laps left to run, Hamilton was sitting behind Max Verstappen, a 4-time world champion in a Red Bull that is faster in a straight line than the Ferrari chasing it. Most drivers wait. Hamilton did not. He dragged his car to the outside line into the first corner, held it where almost nobody holds it, and came out in front. Second place, sealed with the boldest move of the afternoon. When he climbed out of the cockpit, he did not talk like a man who finished second. He talked like a man who had just been let out of a cage. And to understand why one podium means this much to a driver with more wins than almost anyone in history, you have to understand what he was buried under just a few weeks ago. His first deal at Ferrari, the thing that was supposed to make this a fairy tale, was about to read like the opposite. 12 months into the most famous transfer in modern Formula One, Lewis Hamilton was having the worst season of his career. The worst season of his career. His debut year in red was a winless one. No Grand Prix podiums across the entire campaign. He finished 6th in the championship. 86 points adrift of his own teammate, Charles Leclerc. The qualifying record was even harder to look at. Over a single lap, Hamilton was on average around a quarter of a second slower than Leclerc. For a midfield driver, that is a rounding error. For one of the greatest of all time in the car he chose to end his career in, it was the kind of number that gets people whispering that the spark has gone for good. So here was the picture going into 2026. The most decorated driver on the grid in the most famous car in the sport, unable to make the two of them fit together. That was the problem Ferrari had not solved. And nobody arrived at the new season certain they could. Then the sport changed underneath all of them. The 2026 rulebook reset. For 2026, Formula One tore up its rulebook and started again. The power units keep the small turbocharged engine, but throw out one of the energy recovery systems entirely while nearly tripling the electrical power the cars deploy. The balance between engine power and electric power now sits close to 50/50. The fuel is fully sustainable. The old overtaking flap is gone, replaced by movable wings that switch between a straight line mode and a cornering mode. The cars are smaller, lighter, and narrower, with the minimum weight cut from 800 kilograms down to 768 kilograms. A reset that deep does not just change lap times, it reshuffles who is good and who is not. New engine makers arrived. The grid grew, and the established order got thrown in the air. And when the dust settled, the team on top was not Ferrari. It was Mercedes. Going into Canada, Mercedes had won every single race of the season. Their young driver, Kimi Antonelli, had done something no driver in the history of the sport had ever done before him. He had taken his first 4 career wins back-to-back, one after another, with no defeat in between. That is the wall the rest of the grid had been throwing itself at all year. Ferrari, meanwhile, had built something strange and specific. The car they call the SF26 has one of the best chassis on the grid. Through the corners, it can run with anyone, Mercedes included. But on the straights, it loses ground. And on circuits that reward raw engine power, it suffers. Montreal, with its long flat-out runs, is exactly that kind of circuit. The upgrade gamble nobody noticed. And here is the detail almost everyone overlooked heading into the weekend. Ferrari had already fired its biggest shot of the season. At the earlier race in Miami, they had brought 11 new parts to the car, the largest single upgrade package anyone produced that weekend. For Canada, they brought nothing, not one fresh component. That same restraint that looked like weakness on Thursday was about to look like something else entirely by Sunday night. So when McLaren arrived in Montreal with the second phase of their own upgrade package, a new front wing and reshaped bodywork, and Mercedes turned up with new front wing parts, new suspension, and a new floor, The comparison was brutal. Two of Ferrari's biggest rivals were getting faster in real time. Ferrari was standing still on a power track with the car already short on power. Every rational read said they should slide backwards. The weekend opened by proving the pessimists right. This was a sprint event, the compressed format that crams 2 qualifying sessions and 2 races into 3 days and gives you almost no room to recover from a single mistake. And across both qualifying sessions, Mercedes was simply on another planet. In the main qualifying session, the silver cars locked out the entire front row. Hamilton outqualifies Leclerc. George Russell took pole. Antonelli lined up alongside him in second. Hamilton qualified 5th. His best lap less than 3/10 off pole. Close enough to taste, far enough back to confirm the car's ceiling on this layout. But buried inside that 5th place was the number that actually mattered. Hamilton had outqualified Charles Leclerc, and not by a whisker. Leclerc could only manage 8th. The man who spent a full season beating Hamilton in qualifying had just been beaten clearly on a Saturday that counted. That was not a one-off either. In the shorter sprint race earlier that day, Hamilton had come home 6th while the Mercedes pair fought so hard that team boss Toto Wolff told Antonelli over the radio to stop complaining and drive. Hamilton was even investigated by the stewards twice across the weekend. Once for running off track in the sprint, and once for allegedly holding up another car in qualifying. Both times, no penalty. The officials looked, and the officials walked away. And no, that is not a small thing. A driver under that much pressure on a knife-edge sprint weekend kept his nose clean while his rivals were tripping over each other. Across the garage, the other Ferrari was falling apart. Leclerc would go on to call Montreal the most difficult weekend of his career. He fought brake problem. He battled tires that would not switch on. He never found a shred of confidence in the car. Same machine. Same engineers. 2 completely opposite experiences. One Ferrari driver was drowning. The other was finally swimming. Then came Sunday, and the sky decided to make things interesting. The rain bet that broke McLaren. Before I tell you how the race unraveled, do me a favor and hit subscribe. This channel breaks down the real story behind every Formula One weekend. And the 2026 season is turning into one of the strangest in years. While everyone was focused on the front row Mercedes, the weather was quietly rewriting the entire race. Light rain falls across the circuit before the start, not a storm, just enough to soak the surface in patches and leave it drying everywhere else. That is the cruelest kind of rain because it forces every team into a bet. The grippy slick tire or the grooved intermediate built for a wet track. Pick wrong, and your race is over before the real racing starts. McLaren picks. They send both cars out on intermediate tires, betting the track stays wet. The track does the exact opposite. It dries, and one of the strongest teams of the season strands itself on the wrong rubber, sliding backwards while everyone around them finds grip. The championship contender effectively deletes its own afternoon in the opening laps. Hamilton starts on a used set of slicks and nails the launch, picking off a McLaren almost immediately, but the early laps are messy. At one point, Verstappen powers past him, and Hamilton's frustration explodes over the radio in a single desperate shout that he has no power. The Ferrari weakness broadcasts live in the driver's own voice for the whole world to hear.